Well, since that is the case, do you want to go ahead and throw anything that you want me to put up on screen for what you wanted to talk about? Because, if we're already here and we've already accepted the fact that Daily Wire's flushed 25% of its staff down the toilet, we can maybe get into some other unpopular things the right wing has done in recent times.
I can give you a link to something. It's not
Sure.
that important for you to have it up because we're going to be kind of coasting through a bunch of stuff, and I'm mostly going to be talking about things adjacent to this, but I will give this to you. And then I will also send you the actual like straight to the paper, straight to the Senate bill,
Sure.
type of thing.
I'll go ahead and pull those up here.
For clarification to people in stream, something that people probably don't know about me is that I currently live in the state of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And recently, there has been a bill that has been proposed to make it so that trans people are no longer able to change their license, their birth certificate, legal sex, and no longer to use the restroom that is of their gender preference. Which, just saying all that should sound pretty familiar to a lot of you.
It sounds like the shit that we already had to fight against in 2016 and 17. This is like... Do you remember? I'm not sure if you were consuming like atheist skeptic content around that time, but there was a fun divide that happened in the community around bathroom bills ages ago, and then it became another divide over sports, and then eventually the concept of a unified atheist community just kind of died again.
Yeah, I would say that was the point when the like online atheist community started having its like left-wing, progressive era, because back before then it was like really conservative, oddly, which was weird. But yeah,
it is weird unless you've got a few friends who are in various groups that would be affected if, say, religion were to get outlawed today, as an example. So, like, God, it sounds weird to say it this way, but technically, if you take hardcore anti-theism, the idea that like we should be eliminating religions in general because they are a net harm on society, when you take that core belief and take it to its logical extreme, you end up getting to cultural erasure, and cultural erasure is just a happy-go-lucky fun side effect of imperialism. And imperialism usually has more of a conservative or at least harder right neoliberal bent when it comes to just politics in general. So there is an angle of the atheist community tended to be very, very right-wing that makes sense through that lens. Also, there's the other sense where that older atheist community was very, 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 very focused on logic. Very focused on logic, without a lot of them understanding what logic was. It was Foamy the Squirrel style logic.
Well, I think that like one of the better ways to put it may be that like they would use logic, but they didn't understand logic from a social perspective.
Yeah.
Where it was like, it is maybe not logical if you're looking at this from a very much a like, this is just the way that things are and this is how they've always been. But like, if you're looking at it from a social perspective, it's like, oh, actually, yeah. And also, what's crazy? I was thinking about Foamy the Squirrel like 3 days ago, and I, for the life of me, could not remember that character's name, and all I could remember was just the friggin' squirrels.
So like I see where you're coming from. The reason I worded it like that is there was an aspect of, and this is kind of a thing that like we've memed on a lot in recent years, where you'd get a skeptic that would go, it's biology 101. And then you'd go,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's, you know what? You're entirely right. Have you read any of the follow-up literature?
Yeah.
And then you're just like, hey, did you know that gender is actually a not gender, but sex is a bimodal distribution and not actually wholly binary, and that's just sex. And then did you know that gender's separate from that, and we've recognized that at least in America since the 70s. So like
Yeah.
it's there's that extra stuff where you get I guess it's a lot of skeptics using logic as a shield when what they mean is common sense,
Sure.
when common sense is just whatever biases you've accumulated up to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But
But anyways,
yeah,
this bill like is very similar to the things that they were trying to do back in 2016, which is really interesting to me and like sad, obviously. And
because we're
like,
just back again.
yeah. Um, because when it happened in 2016, I was 15 years old. Um, like I had figured out that I was trans like the year before. Like obviously, you know, like I had learned what the word trans meant, and then I figured out that I was trans. And then a year after that, it's like now there's this media fixation and everything on trans people, and then laws are going in. And so it's like I've heard people talk about this like this little golden point where people didn't really like there were rights that were expanding, but people didn't really like hate on trans people as much and everything. And I don't know about that. I never got to experience that really.
I'm gonna
But
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think we've ever actually had a moment where trans people were not looked down upon, like as a social
mhm,
group in the States. So like I've watched a little bit of a bunch of different creators talking about different shows in the 90s and early 2000s where they'll have just like, here's the episode that focuses on trans issues, and they're almost always really fucking bad. They do not actually explore trans issues in a decent way, and sometimes just are flat out hateful. And that comedy, that, you know, trans people being the butt of the joke, is very much something that was perfectly normal in the 90s and
mhm.
early 2000s. And I
Oh,
remember
for sure.
the first time that I even learned that a trans person was something that could exist in general was when my grandpa said that his best friend in the military had transitioned, and that's why they're no longer friends. Like
Jeez.
that was my first experience with the fact that somebody could be trans ever, was hearing that from my grandparent. And so my first understanding was, oh, that's a thing to be avoided, because I looked up to my grandpa. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, you obviously wouldn't want to be with somebody who did that. Obviously, I don't think that way anymore. But I can't think of a time where, like, we didn't find some way to shit on trans people's rights. It's just that as the Overton window moved a bit and trans people became more accepted by the left, the right ended up attacking them more and more openly, and then trying to
Mm-hmm.
put up this, because I'm sure you've heard the stupid fucking argument where they'll go, actually, this isn't our fault. This is because the transes weren't kept under
Yeah.
control. And now this is just what happens. And, oh, if only they had kept themselves under control. Like, in control in what fucking way? What?
Well, it's like it's and I've gotten to see this kind of go through with my entire life and stuff, but it's what they do is they find the point that seems the most reasonable to argue against with discrimination. It's like, that's the whole thing with the whole like sports thing, because at face value, it's like it sounds like it would be unfair, right? Like if you're uneducated and stuff and like someone says, hey, this person used to be, I'm just going to use their terminology, biologically male, and then they transitioned and everything to being female, but now they're going to play in sports and stuff. That can sound unfair at face value. And then it's like with a bunch of studying and everything, you're like, okay, well, it's actually a bit more complex than people make it out to be. Like it usually is.
Yeah.
But they start from that spot of it being like, hey, we're just asking questions. We're just being reasonable here. And like, it's no one wants to say you can't ask questions, and you can, and like that's why there's people who do studies and stuff for sports. Like
Yeah,
there
like
are
that.
sports scientists,
I guess
you know.
there's a fun hole I want to poke in that, not towards you obviously,
Sure.
but a fun hole to poke in that is when somebody goes, I'm just asking questions. You go, I understand. Question for you: do you even know what questions to ask?
Mm-hmm.
Because a big thing about scientific studies is trying to ask the correct question based on a hypothesis. And if you can't ask the right questions in the first place, then you're not going to get to an answer that matters. So, like, if someone were to ask the question, does a trans woman have advantages over a cis woman in sports? The obvious answer is going to be, well, based on the way you worded that, the answer is yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is going to be both yes and no. What advantages are we talking about? What sports are we talking about? And very rarely are you going to find somebody that has ever taken the time to even drill into the nuance in that. They just want to hear a yes or no and then not think further than that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when you go, hey, what if it's a trans woman who just started HRT 2 weeks ago? Then
Yeah.
I mean that changes things based on if she's been on HRT for a year or so. Hell, I've made I've made the joke with Saki a few times. Like if we get to wrestling or if she grabs something and I grab it at the same time, we're just like playing around. I'll just go, "You gave up that strength years ago."
Excuse me. Yeah, for sure. And like the honest answer with this stuff is like it really does depend, which is what you're saying, but like it depends on a lot. It's like, okay, well, the person in question, how long have they been transitioning? What is, like when did they start it and everything? Like there's a lot that goes into these questions, but a lot of the times the answer ends up being like there's not very much of a difference. Like most sports, there's not very much of a difference. And then in the ones that there are, they just like the people who do have an advantage, they end up saying no, and then like it's kind of just they play it by ear, I guess is the way to go by it. Although ear is not the right term, but they play it by the moment, I guess.
They case by
Um,
case basis, I think, is what you're
Case by
looking
case.
for.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Um,
Like there's a reason that the Olympics spent a bunch of money studying this shit and came to the conclusion that after a year of HRT, in most circumstances, cis women and trans women are as equal as any other diverse population of people you could throw into a bucket.
exactly.
Um, and even at the end result of those studies was that cis women who have a higher natural level of testosterone, like because they have PCOS or something like that, then they have to take a testosterone. They have to take something that mutes that in order for them
Mm-hmm.
to get low enough testosterone levels. So, like, there was a side effect of these studies where cis people ended up getting affected because they went, yeah, it turns out it's not whether or not there's a penis there that matters. It's what these levels are doing to the muscles.
Yep, exactly. I mean, we're very broad. We're very broad as a group of people. I mean, trans people are, but like humans in general are just extremely broad, and so you can't just say, uh, and again, using their terminology, this is not how I would normally put it, but biological male in sports bad. Like, no, you, like it's just not that simple. But
There
anyway,
is somebody in the chat who is asking a thing real quick. Trace James, this was worded really weirdly, but it was, can I ask a serious question? Why is it transgender? And Brooke just mentioned matching gender and not sex and trans sex. Things like choosing which bathroom someone to go in based on sex. Someone can be cis A but gender B. So like Saki is trans M2F if I remember correctly, and ideally uses the women's bathroom because they are female, not just female like an interest and whatnot. Otherwise, my cousin and cousin-in-law should be using the men's bathroom because she's big into cars and I shouldn't. Okay, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of mixed up terminology happening over there. So firstly, there's no such thing as a male or a female interest. Let's get that one out of the way. Being into cars, that being a male thing is 110% shit we made up. We made it up for marketing reasons, actually.
Yeah.
Hell, like video games being a male thing, because that used to be seen as a very broadly male category of advertisement, was something concocted by Nintendo so that they could get into the toy aisle and sell stuff to kids instead of being in the electronics aisle where Atari failed during the video game crash. So, like, 110%, the idea of interests being gendered is made the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, I want to play on that a little bit. Like
Yeah.
it's made up, and it's like it's because of like social like it's because people push social boundaries onto other people and everything. Like, I have considered myself to be a woman for longer than I've known what it means to be trans and stuff. But that doesn't, and like the closest thing that I could get to saying, I had the quote unquote female interest or whatever is that, like, I used to like the idea of wearing a dress and I would make a fake dress or whatever. But the reality is that, like, in most things, it's just like, that's not why I'm trans. Like,
Yeah, you're not trans because you like a dress. Otherwise, every drag queen is trans, and they're not.
Yeah.
If every drag queen were trans, then skag wouldn't be a category.
Yeah, it's just it's a different thing. And like we already know this as a baseline in society. That's why we have terminologies for people who don't like fit that group. Of course, I kind of find that weird in and of
police
itself.
Are coming for you.
Yeah, I get sirens around here. But we have terms like, tomboy or femboy or whatever, and there's other terms too, but I'm just using those as examples.
Yeah.
Where that, like, these are people who kind of just don't fit the very rigid gender roles that our society has, and like we still understand them to be the gender that they identify as, ergo girl and boy respectively. But yeah, I'm not quite. I had read that before, and the problem is that I actually have like issues with reading comprehension. So if a sentence is worded weirdly at all, I just cannot comprehend what they're saying.
Yeah, I find that based on the way it's worded, I think we have to tackle it like one misconception at a time. The first one being there's no such thing as a gendered interest. We get that out of the way. Now, the one word that was not used ever during that was identity. And identity is the word that we should be looking for. What makes somebody male or female is whether they identify as that, period. Otherwise, a trans woman is not a woman until she has the money to get HRT. Or, the wherewithal to steal the HRT pills from the people who don't need them. Either way, because of that mechanical separation there in my brain, I would say that if a person's identity is one thing, then they should go where they are comfortable with that identity. So women's bathroom for people who identify as women, and male bathroom for people who identify as men. Especially in the women's bathroom, the fact that there are no urinals, it is just going to be toilets. If the person who walked in that day went to the bathroom and they're there with you, you've probably had a trans person shitting next to you and you've had no idea if you're a cis woman. It didn't change your day then, and it's not going to change your day now. Likewise, only the weirdest of weird fuckos in the men's restroom look at the other guys at the urinals. So again, it's not affecting you. if somebody happens to get there. Also, if a trans man goes to the urinal standing up and has not had bottom surgery, that's just more impressive than anything. I'm fucking sorry.
That's base as hell. That's incredible.
That's just something that is a skill that I cannot fathom.
You need to respect. You need to show respect immediately.
So because of that, because it functionally doesn't affect anybody, the question has to be, who is the target of any bill when there is a bill that is anti-trans in regards to bathrooms, since that's the topic we're on right now. And the target is always worded to be women who are victims who need to be protected. The reality is, if there is a sexual predator who wants to get to you, a sign does not stop them. A rule does not stop them. It's just as easy to go into the bathroom if you're a trans woman as it is to go into the bathroom if you're just a man. There's nothing stopping you at that point.
Yeah, it's literally just a door. Like,
yeah, it's just a door. A door doesn't stop a rapist. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like, it's the same deal as, like, you got the employees only sign at a store and then saying, it's impossible to go to the back.
Yeah, it's impossible to get back there. Like,
no, like, it's not. And it's just like, you just walk back there and that's literally it.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is, when we're talking about bills like this, the conversation doesn't need to be, what specific criterion do we use to enforce this rigid social thing? Now, fuck that shit. The question needs to be, when we are trying to enforce our social shit, who is getting affected by this, and is it a positive effect or a negative effect? If the only effect from this is one side gets to pearl clutch and the other side gets to get sexually assaulted more, by the way, fun fact, when trans women are forced to go into men's restrooms, they get sexually assaulted more. We have fun data on this. You start asking the question instead, like I said, who is the target and why?
Yeah. The point, and, like, here's the thing, the point is not to make it where that, like, trans people are upset or are unable to go to the bathroom, really. Like, that is the point. But the real point, largely, is to disenfranchise you so much that you don't feel like you have the ability to be yourself. And the ultimate goal is just to get rid of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw the ultimate endoomer things that I have made in the last month, but the video on the transgenocide happening in the United States. But the conclusion I reached in that video was, if you wanted to eliminate a group of people from the United States without receiving backlash, how would you do it? You would do it in the most invisible way possible. One component of that is the obvious one that the Trevor Project found out. Suicide rates go up when you make more anti-trans bills. It's simple as that. The other thing is, if you can make that group of people invisible, then people don't care when they disappear. And that it sounds tinfoil hatty, but ask yourself the question, if we do things like what was asked to be done in Project 2025, where you label a trans person existing in public as pornographic and therefore an offense that needs to be sent, that sends a person to prison. What is the purpose of that? Who's actually being protected? Who is the target of that? If the result of that is less trans people are comfortable going out in public, you've just made trans people less visible. If you've made trans people less visible, then why did you do that, if not for eliminating them in society at large?
Exactly.
This is what we do with homeless people, by the way. Fun fact. This is somebody in my video got mad at me saying that, oh, well, why aren't you talking about the genocide against homeless people? First of all, to you, whoever you are, I understand where you're coming from. My response is, thank you for bringing this to my attention. This is not the way to do that. Whataboutism doesn't help here. But for you specifically, the 13 of you that commented that in that video, this is the thing we do with homeless people, because instead of getting housing for homeless people, we try to push homeless people further and further into the woods. That is what city planning tries to do with hostile architecture. So because we do that, It's because we're not trying to actually fix the problem, which is homeless people don't have a place where they are safe and comfortable being. We think the problem is actually your regular, everyday United States citizen who has a home feeling uncomfortable around vagrants. That's who the bills are aimed at. People who want to feel more comfortable when they walk outside, as opposed to fixing the problem, which is the people outside instead of in homes and with jobs.
You make a group of people into a group of quote unquote undesirables.
Correct.
Or people who are perceived to be dangerous with mental illness or whatever. And then you portray them as unhelpable, unsavable, and continually have society feel as if that they should be pushed further and further back to, in even cases where that, like, they're not hurting anybody, which, like, let's be totally real here. Sleeping on a bench doesn't hurt anybody.
Sleeping on a bench doesn't hurt anybody, and sawing off that metal thing that is in the middle of the bench that looks like an armrest but doesn't help anybody also doesn't hurt anyone. I can't suggest doing that, but I certainly can say it doesn't harm anybody.
Yeah, for, no one's saying to go and do that, but, but yeah,
I'm not saying this because there's a person in the chat who was homeless and I did have to go rescue myself and get them to New Zealand. Hi, Arachne. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying this because of personal experiences or anything.
Yeah. But, and also to the people who, commented that in your video, I guess the thing that I would say to those people is that, it's good to talk about all different types of human rights and stuff, but, exploring and trying to call attention to human rights violation for one group does not make it where that another group is worse off.
Yeah, it's it doesn't help anybody when you do that. It doesn't. Again, I appreciate calling to attention because it reminds me that there's more avenues that I have to do where activism is concerned.
Yep.
But saying, hey, trans people are in trouble does not negate the plight of other people who are also in trouble. Also, in my situation, I have several friends who are trans. I have a girlfriend who is trans. Yep. As a result of that, my interests are going to be, hey, I want to protect the people that I care about, and more often than not, right now it's going to end up being trans people that I talk about a lot. If somebody feels like that means that I'm focusing on the wrong issues, or even weirder, if somebody goes, hey, this means you're trans, Cirrus, that's weird. I wasn't aware. Is
weird.
I wasn't aware that not wanting slavery to come back made me black.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that not wanting Hiroshima bombed again made me Japanese.
Yeah.
That's really weird.
And also, here's the thing. Other people, you have the ability to go and talk about these things as well.
Correct.
Cirrus,
make your own video.
Cirrus is one man, okay? He does a whole lot. He does a lot of good and everything, but also one guy.
I wouldn't say I do a lot of good. I just kind of sit here on the internet and yell.
I mean, I'd say you do good, but in any case, Cirrus is one guy, okay? And if you want to call attention to certain things, you can bring it up to Cirrus and everything, and you can bring it up to other creators. But at the end of the day, the only person who you can really depend on to talk about the things that you are thinking about is you.
It's so weird. That's so weird coming from a content creator that makes comments about issues, or that makes comics about issues that are important to her. That's so strange coming from you.
Yeah,
what?
Right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be as big as what Cirrus does. It doesn't have to be it doesn't even have to be what I do, which is just make comics and stuff. It can just be you post it on your social media and you say, hey, such and such a thing is bad, actually. I know that that's kind of a meme in and of itself, but the truth is that sometimes it's okay to just call these things out in open discussion. But yeah, yeah.
Speaking of things that are bad that we should be calling out in open discussion, why the fuck is North Carolina proposing to ban trans people from restrooms again?
So I assume it has a lot to do with the bill that was passed by the White House at the beginning of the year, with making it so that people are only I can't remember what was the wording, are only recognized by the sex that they are assigned when they were not at birth. They didn't
It
use
was
the
sex
term
at
birth.
conception,
Sex at
which
conception,
which,
which
which
doesn't make any
means that
sense.
all of us are women.
All of us
All
are
of us
women.
are women. Every one of us.
But yeah, I assume that this is them pushing further into that, and going back with the whole thing that happened back in 2016. Um, the thing is, let's see, hold on. I bet North Carolina's Republican is posturing to match with Trump. Exactly. Like it's posturing. Like trying to make them seem aligned and everything, so that like the people who voted for Trump will see North Carolina as aligned, and yeah. Um, but I think that one of the things that we can remember is like if you look back at 2016, that bill was inconceivably unpopular and just largely a failure.
Yeah, the only
Um,
people that were celebrating that bill were like your Matt Walshes and your Ben Shapiros, who literally get paid to celebrate those bills.
well, the thing is that that bill ended up costing the state of North Carolina like a lot. Like I know that this is not always the best idea to like look at these things in terms of finance or whatever, but the honest truth is that like um ACC pulled championships from North Carolina because of that bill. And that took a lot of money out of North Carolina. And there were a lot of boycotts that ended up taking a lot of money from North Carolina because of this bill. And so it was literally a year later that it was like pulled back on. Like it it kind of stinks that this is the way that it is, but like one of the best things that like I learned from looking into it and seeing all this is that like you do have power as a group of people. Like, hey, I don't like this bill. I think that this is bullshit. And because of that, I'm not going to support businesses slash whatever that aligns itself with this. And because of that, you end up getting things like the ACC championships being pulled away from it. And then that's the thing, is that a lot of these people, at the end of the day, what they care about is money. That's just
They,
kind
they
of what they're here. They're here
yeah,
for money and power.
they can talk something something Bible, something something Christian morals all they want, but their wallet is what they care about the most. Like they're to say it in the weirdest way possible. Most of these politicians are capitalists first, Christians second.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not saying voting with your wallet works all the time,
No.
because voting with your wallet is a you individually as this person, but there is something to be said about an entire boycott, and not the God, because I've
Not
made
the
fun of
posturing boycotts of like
not the
burning your Nikes or whatever, but like,
or the ones where they're like, we're not going to buy anything from Amazon for 24 hours. Okay, so you're going to buy from Amazon afterwards. So
yeah,
nothing will
exactly.
change in their bottom line. Like no, the point of a boycott is to operate like it's a strike. And a strike is not a thing that happens for 2 weeks. A strike happens until
Until you get your
negotiations.
way.
Yeah, until negotiations have ended. That's how a strike works. So if you're going to do a boycott, you don't do a boycott for a day or a week or 2 weeks. You do a boycott until negotiations end. That's how it works.
Yeah. It and I think that like I don't know if it can be exactly the same way this time, obviously, but I think that just looking through that has made me feel a lot better about the situation. Not that it's a good thing. I don't believe that this bill will get passed. But what I will say is that it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does matter if it gets passed or not. But if it doesn't pass, it's still not a good thing. And
Yeah,
I'll
they're
tell
gonna
you
try
why.
again.
Well, yeah, but the problem with bills like this, and I know that you've talked about this in the past. I remember like when I started transitioning, I was listening to you talk about it and everything. One of the larger points of these bills that are not likely to pass is that they are flooding people with anti-LGBT, anti-trans, whatever bills in order to move society more towards the right, to normalize the idea of these things being proposed and enacted. And the more that you normalize it, the more like, okay, so we said no to this because that's awful, that's crazy. But this slightly less awful and crazy idea that you're proposing, I guess we'll let that one slide. And that's
It,
like,
Fun
that's how I
fact,
feel.
there's a historical precedent for this, but it's actually like obviously there's historical precedents for this in politics, but there's historical precedents for this in the movie industry of all things. If you'd like to see
Hmm.
how this gets done, how many people in chat have seen any film by Alfred Hitchcock? So, fun bit of movie trivia: there is a scene in The Birds from Alfred Hitchcock where the main female character, who gets killed off like 2/3 of the way through the movie, she starts out the film wearing white lingerie, and halfway through the film she begins wearing black lingerie because she's done something that she should not have done. She gets sullied. The usual, like, how horror movies see people having sex thing. So there were scenes in that movie that were considered very, very gruesome for the time. But there were even more gruesome scenes, and if memory serves, like outright porn in the original version of the movie. And none of that was intended to actually be shown in theaters by Alfred Hitchcock. He knew that
Mm.
the movie industry had a set of standards for what they would allow, and the things he wanted in were outside of those standards, or he'd have to fight very hard for those standards. A way that he found around that in multiple movies was to put even more. I guess Psycho also does it. Yeah, it's Psycho, not The Birds. Psycho's the one that does this. Is to put even more gruesome and downright pornographic scenes in the movie, so that when you are showing the
Hmm.
test version of the film, they go, "No, we can't show this filth. We can't do any of this." But this other stuff, I guess in comparison, that's okay. It softens people up to the idea. It softens a director up, or even a publisher up to the idea of some of the more extreme things that you're trying to get there, because you use more extreme language earlier in the showing. And the same thing works in politics.
Hmm.
You present a Richard Spencer, right? And a Richard Spencer is really far to the right, 100% okay with the Sig Heils and everything. And yeah, you get small audiences for your Richard Spencers and your Nick Fuenteses, but they make Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh look normal by comparison.
Hmm.
So I I agree with that assessment because I've seen it. It's spooky.
Yeah. It. I mean, and the thing is that like with stuff like this, it's kind of hard to look at this and say, okay, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Because it's like, well, it's a social thing and you can't control society. But you kind of do in a way. Like you
Yeah, you have
control
you have
you.
some little measure of individual push and pull on that.
Yeah, we do have agency. We have the people in our lives that we can talk to, and like remind them, like, hey, like this wasn't okay before, and it's still not okay now, even if our bar has gotten a lot lower. Um, and a lot of times, like I feel like a lot of times people will kind of roll their eyes at first, but I think if you keep on reaffirming this stuff, um, it can be fairly effective. I kind of struggle with this, to be honest, because the best
Struggling with like
ways,
the what to do here.
yeah, because it's like this is what we've been seeing for the last like 2 years, basically. I mean, for longer than that, but like specifically in the last 2 years, with like, you would look over and every single year would be the most anti-LGBT bills that, has ever been on record kind of thing. You'd see that headline pop up every year.
Because it keeps happening.
Because it keeps happening, yeah, and they just pushed further and further. But it is the case that, like, in the past, things have been not good. I'm not going to say good, but have been better. And I don't know. I'm curious to see what you think is like the best way to move forward on this stuff.
So I think there is no one best way to move forward. I think we have to have a very holistic approach when it comes to something like this. Obviously, at a base level, things we all can do. Everybody's got friends around them who might not be super comfortable talking about, if we're just going to stay on this particular topic, trans issues, right?
Sure.
You've always got a friend who's like, they're fairly liberal, but on this one issue, they kind of feel differently. That person is easy to talk with because you might get them to agree with like 90% of things, and then you get to the sports conversation, and then you have a back and forth. I think it's a good idea at a base level for any of you who want to engage in these conversations to get very well studied on all of the data where they're concerned. And I need you to also not use that data when you're having conversations with people. It sounds weird and dumb, but I promise you, this is dealing with human psychology. If you want somebody to come to you on an issue and come to agree with you on an issue, you do that far better by asking questions than talking down to a person. So instead of going, well, actually, the data on sports says this, they've probably heard that 12 billion times and they've tuned it out. If you instead go, hey, I understand you feel that way, and I can understand that perspective, but why do you feel that way? Why is that? Also, Trace James says, time to plug the Rhino trans research document. Yes, Rhino has a amazing master document of trans research that you can use if you want to get studied up on this stuff. But if you're going to have conversations with people at a baseline, put the ball in their court more often than not and get them to explain their position. Because oftentimes, if you don't, you and that person are going to end up talking past each other, and you're not going to change even that more liberal-minded person's opinion on something that they already agree 90% of the time. Now you then have the harder problem of talking with your friends and family who may be right-wing. For me, I have family who is right-wing. I have a lot of friends who are right-wing. And anytime that they want to talk to me about politics, I'm open to it, and we have a conversation. Also, they know my channel exists, so like they also know my opinion on 90% of things anyway. But that's a unique position for me. That's at the baseline. That doesn't do a whole lot, but it does make your personal sphere better and more digestible for you, and it could have ripple effects there. But on to what you should be doing about bills like this to actually cause some impact. There's a handful of things you can do. One, there is a website called 5 Calls, and I would highly recommend you use it. This is a website that allows you to get in direct contact with any of your representatives, whether they be in the Senate, whether they be in the House, whether they be for local politics. 5 Calls will get you to where you can talk on the phone with these people. It is very easy to ignore an email. It's very easy to ignore a text. It's very hard to ignore you pleading with somebody on a phone, especially when it's a lot of you. And it's for those of you who are a little more aggressive, maybe more A-type personalities in the audience, it's really hard for a politician to ignore you telling them that you vote in the primaries and you're willing to put somebody else out instead of them.
Yeah.
That's really hard to ignore.
Yeah, like literally what we were saying before is that, they're trying to sway things so that these ideas are more okay and everything. And if you say, hey, actually, what you're doing is not popular, and like you can give them that idea pretty easily by just being involved and stuff. A lot of
Yep.
times they'll back up because you're cutting off their way of life.
And if you need access to any of the research that shows how unpopular these anti-trans opinions tend to be, there's a couple of areas you can go. One, obviously, there's the actual direct information that Rhino has compiled together. But another thing, Progressive Victory has research days where you can just hop into their Discord and research with people to get some of this information there so that you have it available. My experience going to the Capitol and lobbying is that it is way easier to hand the research to a politician as opposed to trying to word it yourself, because I promise you, most of you, including myself, have some form of social anxiety. That's why you're in a Twitch chat instead of at a bar with other normal people. As a result of that, most of us really do not operate well without a guide of some kind, because the minute somebody gives us pushback, it can get hard to handle that conversation. So have your research ready, even if it's just so that you have notes to go off of when you're talking with these politicians over the phone, or hell, get in your car and go to your state capitol and, bitch at them there. Again, I've done it.
Yeah.
I've talked about it on stream. It's a thing that you can do. It's not the hardest thing in the world. It's just stressful, but everything is stressful right now, so that's not new.
Yeah, and also on the thing of what you were saying, with the social anxiety and having the research and stuff. I mean, you can also go as far as to have a thing with bullet points.
Yeah,
and
fucking have notepads. Just have a note card with bullet points. That's fine.
Yeah, and then you can even have it where it's okay, well, here's the pushback section where it's if they try to push back, this is what I say. Yeah, as long as you are doing things to make sure they know, hey, this is not popular, and if you keep doing this, you're going to lose this election that's coming up or whatever. A lot of times that can be incredibly useful.
Now,
so, yeah.
If you want to make good on your threats about primarying your local politicians, then might I suggest the Democratic Socialists of America. Now, I have talked with some of the representatives here, and the focus for the DSA is on local elections, so you can't really use a whole lot of stuff here to directly threaten somebody in the larger House or the Senate, but you certainly can try. They don't need to know. Right? That politician doesn't need to know exactly how far this threat can go, but definitely get involved with your local DSA chapter, and hopefully you won't have the same experiences that I did, where a car caught on fire on the highway and I got stuck for 3 hours trying to go to mine. So
yeah, hopefully
your experience will be a little better. But definitely do that so you can get involved with people who are doing phone banking and canvassing and stuff, so that you can actually make good on the threat of telling a politician, hey, fucko, if you don't do this thing, then I'm just going to get you taken out in the primary. Sorry, buddy. You can also go over to Mobilize, and this was on March 29th. I did not go to this one. Oh, well, anyway. You can also go to Mobilize, and you can find a lot of more normie politics stuff in your area. This is where you'll get youth organizing at the Capitol. This is where you'll get, hey, my local politics group for my county was having a thing in Taste of Hiram, where every city has their own a taste of thing where all of the local food places have a booth where they sell some of their shit. You can get involved going to any of these places so that you can not only learn how to canvass, learn how to actually put somebody else in front for a primary, but you also get this amazing experience of being around other people who are not only like-minded politically, but are also willing to engage in action. That's the key, because if you do not know what to do, which is most of us, I'm sure, when it comes to politics, we're all kind of doing this by ear. If you don't know what to do, surrounding yourself with people who do know what to do it'll rub off on you, mostly because you can ask them about what to do. But you'll be in a position where you can learn how to become more effective politically. I'd also suggest, when it comes to threatening your local politicians, if your politicians are hosting a town hall around you, go and attend and try to be one of the people who gets up in the Q&A. They usually have 30 minutes of Q&A, 30 minutes to an hour. And during that question and answer, you can put the screws to them directly. And here's the fun thing. Every single person in politics, thank you for the follow, Jan the Goblin. Every single person in politics really likes having their 15 minutes of fame for something. Whether you're a senator, whether you're a representative, whether you're in for local office, every single one of them benefits greatly from a popularity contest going in their favor. So, if a politician is doing something that you do not like, and you manage to get into one of their town halls, and you can be the person who goes viral for putting the screws to them on something that they've done that is wildly unpopular and cruel, guess what? You've actively hurt their chances of re-election whenever that goes viral. And God, this is content creator brain thinking for me more than normie brain. But if you've got a friend with you who can record the altercation, because the sound quality at a lot of these town halls sucks, it was when I went to Nikema Williams' town hall, you can do your own footwork in making sure that putting the screws to these politicians goes viral. Like, at the end of the day, getting the job in political office is a popularity contest, so make it really difficult for the politicians who you don't like to win the popularity contest. You have ways to do it that are traditional, like the canvassing and primarying somebody else, and you have non-traditional ways, like making their night a living hell at a town hall and putting that video up on the internet. You've got a lot of options that you can do, and again, when it comes to footwork stuff, I've gone to all of these kinds of events. They just let you walk in. You'll be fine. I promise.
Yeah. And like, you joked about it being like a social media thing to do, but like, I don't think that that's, a bad thing at all. It's like, yeah, it's not the quote unquote traditional way of doing things, but like, since when are we the people who care about things being the traditional way?
We definitely traditionally threw the tea in the harbor.
Like, as long as it's effective and it's like moving things in a good direction, then yeah. With that, I'm gonna go run and use the restroom real quick, and then we can move on if you're ready to move on. But
sure.
Yeah,
perfectly
I'll be
okay
right back.
with that. Then for the end of this segment, what I'll say is if you have not already followed Brooke over on Blue Sky or over on her new Twitch channel where she's been streaming, please consider doing so. I should have links in the description to both of those when this goes up on YouTube. And if you're here in Twitch, just click the button that says @Brook2Valley and that will take you there. So thank you very much, Brooke. I know that you're not here to hear this right now because you are doing bathroom things, but speaking of bathroom things, bathroom bills bad. Fight against them. Insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Lil Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.